August 15, 1945. Just after noon. Tokyo. The summer air hangs thick with humidity, drifting through open windows and shuttered shops. In neighborhoods still scarred by firebombing, families cluster around wooden radios, many of them repaired with wire, tape, or pure hope. Children sit on tatami mats. Mothers wipe soot from the lacquered knobs. Fathers stand rigid, unsure whether to sit or bow. Across the shattered capital, a hush spreads like a slow-moving tide. Because today, something impossible is about to happen. Inside the Imperial Palace, the chrysanthemum-emblazoned fortress at the heart of Japan, corridors are dim, curtains drawn to keep out the searing heat. Courtiers whisper in stiff, hurried tones. Guards shift nervously, uniforms clinging to damp skin. And in a secure broadcasting room behind thick soundproof walls, a lacquered phonograph disc rests in a wooden box. On it, a recording that no living Japanese has ever heard before. Their emperor's voice. For centuries, the tenno has been a presence felt but never heard. A divine symbol, distant, untouchable, shaped by myth more than mortal familiarity. But now, as Japan faces ruin, surrender, and an uncertain future, that silence is about to break. Across the country, the anticipation is electric. Many civilians believe this broadcast will announce a new miracle weapon. Others pray for peace. Some cannot imagine defeat at all. All wait in breathless confusion. Inside a cramped Tokyo apartment, a young mother clutches her infant closer. In a rural rice village, an elderly farmer, barefoot in the mud, leans toward the community radio set. On a naval base in Kyushu, wounded sailors crane forward from their stretchers. The crackling static shifts. The emperor's message begins. Yet before the meaning becomes clear, one question hangs in every household. What will he say? And how will the people of Japan react when they hear their emperor's human voice for the first time? By mid-1945, Japan teeters on the edge of collapse. The once mighty Imperial Navy has been reduced to fragments, scattered ships burning in the Pacific. The army, entrenched across islands from Okinawa to the home islands, faces relentless aerial bombardment. Tokyo, Osaka, and Yokohama have been leveled in a firestorm of incendiary bombs. The air still smells of ash and charred wood. Tens of thousands are dead, millions displaced, and the civilian population endures hunger, disease, and the constant specter of annihilation. The Allies are poised for final action. American B-29s dominate the skies, while Allied naval forces blockade ports. Strategic planners speak openly of Operation Downfall, the projected invasion of Kyushu, which promises catastrophic casualties on both sides. Yet within the highest levels of Japanese command, the question remains: surrender or prolong the war at unimaginable cost? Inside the Imperial Palace, Emperor Hirohito convenes his closest advisors. Prime Minister Suzuki, War Minister Anami, and Foreign Minister Togo deliberate in tense, whispered tones. The emperor himself, traditionally a figure of symbolic authority rather than direct military command, now must confront a reality even generals hesitate to name: defeat. Sources record that Hirohito, though pale and physically frail, shows a clarity of thought that belies his age. He understands that continued resistance risks the total annihilation of Japan. Outside the palace, civilians remain largely uninformed of the gravity of the situation. Propaganda has insisted on heroic endurance. Children chant patriotic slogans at school, factories hum with production, and radios echo with optimistic news of victories long past. Yet, whispers circulate, rumors of new weapons, destroyed cities, and the growing might of the American war machine. Fear and hope intertwine. By early August, the strategic situation crystallizes. On August 6th, Hiroshima is destroyed by an atomic bomb. 3 days later, Nagasaki falls. Reports arrive in Tokyo through stunned generals and hushed cables. The scale of devastation is incomprehensible. For the first time, the leadership must reconcile that Japan's fate may no longer be determined by courage or cunning, but by forces beyond imagination. Hirohito faces a historic dilemma. Publicly, the imperial rescript commands loyalty and resistance. Privately, he grasps that surrender is essential to preserve the nation's remnants. Meetings in the palace are tense. Ministers debate the morality and necessity of capitulation, some arguing for continued sacrifice, others urging acceptance. Anami, the war minister, reportedly contemplates ritual suicide rather than preside over surrender. Yet Hirohito's decision grows increasingly resolute. He will speak to his people, breaking centuries of silence, in order to announce Japan's surrender and explain the devastating consequences of continuing the war. As August 15th approaches, the emperor and his advisors record the speech, a message unprecedented in tone and intent. This recording is intended not only to instruct, but to humanize the emperor in a way the Japanese people have never experienced, preparing them for a peace that many have been trained to fear as dishonorable. August 15, 1945. Midday. Tokyo is hushed, as though the entire city holds its breath. Radios crackle across homes, schools, and factories. The lacquered phonograph disc in the Imperial Palace spins slowly, its grooves carrying words that will shatter the silence surrounding the emperor for the first time. Inside the recording studio, a few select courtiers and military officials stand rigid, aware of the historic gravity. No one speaks. The whir of the phonograph and the faint hum of electricity fill the room. Hirohito's voice emerges, calm, deliberate, yet faintly tremulous. We have resolved to endure the unendurable and accept the terms set forth by the Allies. For the first time, the Japanese people hear their sovereign not as a distant deity, but as a mortal human being confronting catastrophe. The voice is soft, formal, tinged with sorrow. There is no flourish, no call to heroic battle, only the weight of reality. Across the country, reactions are immediate and intense. In Tokyo, a factory worker drops his wrench. Silence envelops his floor as colleagues exchange uncertain glances. In Hiroshima, soldiers recovering from burns sit in stunned quiet, some leaning closer to the radios, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. In a remote fishing village, elders gather, whispering to grandchildren that the world they knew has changed in an instant. Among the military hierarchy, the response is fractured. Some officers, like Admiral Toyoda, reportedly sit frozen, unable to reconcile their devotion to honor with the emperor's words. Others, recalling centuries of loyalty, bow their heads silently, perceiving surrender not as shame, but as duty to preserve the nation. Prime Minister Suzuki listens intently, a handwritten note trembling in his hand as he notes the precise phrasing. The voice of the emperor, now guiding action where previously only ritual existed. The emperor continues. We have suffered the unthinkable, and our land is laid waste. The time has come to endure for the sake of peace, to prevent the annihilation of our people. Every word carries the weight of decades of tradition, military doctrine, and national mythology. Civilians sense it instinctively. They feel the shock of hearing the emperor speak, a human voice bridging generations of reverence, fear, and obedience. For some, tears well; for others, disbelief. This moment crystallizes a truth Japan has long avoided. The war is lost, and their fate rests not on valor alone, but on the mercy of a foreign enemy. The emperor's voice transforms abstract defeat into an immediate, personal reality, altering the emotional landscape of an entire nation in a single broadcast. As the phonograph's final words fade, a stunned silence blankets Tokyo and stretches across Japan. Civilians remain motionless, some frozen mid-task, others clutching children or radios. The magnitude of the message sinks in slowly, first disbelief, then comprehension. People begin to murmur, whispers spreading like wildfire. The war is over. The emperor has spoken. Japan must surrender. In urban apartments, the elderly weep quietly, mourning both the dead and the shattering of a lifelong belief in eternal honor. Mothers cradle children who have never known a world without war, unsure how to explain the impossible, that their nation has lost. In factories and offices, clerks and workers stop machinery and pens alike, absorbing the unprecedented human voice of the emperor delivering a national command. Among the military, reactions vary dramatically. Field commanders receive the broadcast with shock. Some continue to debate whether to obey orders, struggling with deeply ingrained codes of Bushido and loyalty. Naval officers on isolated islands reportedly lower their flags, some refusing to speak for hours, dazed by the rupture of decades of martial ideology. Others scramble to reconcile the emperor's directive with plans for last-ditch resistance, unsure if continued fighting is honorable or catastrophic. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Suzuki and cabinet officials convene immediately after the broadcast. Messages are dispatched to military units across the archipelago, instructing them to cease hostilities. Some garrisons comply promptly, while others hesitate, reflecting the chaotic chain of command and the deeply personal loyalty soldiers feel toward their superiors. Reports from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, already devastated by atomic strikes, reinforce urgency. Publicly, propaganda ministries scramble to reinterpret the emperor's words in a more palatable way, emphasizing the preservation of the nation rather than defeat. Yet privately, officials acknowledge the grim reality. Japan's war effort has ended, and survival now depends on compliance and surrender. Across the country, ordinary citizens begin to prepare for a life they cannot yet visualize, rationing, rebuilding, mourning. In villages, families gather at shrines, offering prayers not for victory, but for endurance. In cities, crowds convene at radio stations, repeating the emperor's words aloud, trying to make sense of the human voice that has shifted the entire nation from myth to mortal vulnerability. The immediate aftermath is a nation suspended between awe and grief, obedience and disbelief, a fragile liminal moment that will shape the final hours of the war and the collective consciousness of Japan for generations. The emperor's broadcast reverberates far beyond the final days of August 1945. For historians, sociologists, and the Japanese people themselves, its significance is profound. It marks the first time a divine sovereign spoke directly to his subjects, humanizing the mythos of the emperor and transforming the very relationship between ruler and populace. Strategically, the broadcast ensured the swift cessation of organized resistance. Allied forces, prepared for potentially catastrophic invasions, were spared tens of thousands of casualties. Military historians note that had the emperor remained silent, isolated garrisons might have continued fighting for months, perpetuating destruction and prolonging civilian suffering. In this sense, Hirohito's voice was not merely symbolic, it was decisive. Culturally, the broadcast initiates a paradigm shift. For centuries, the emperor had been an almost untouchable figure, present in rituals but absent from ordinary life. His direct communication creates a precedent, a sovereign accountable, comprehensible, and profoundly human. Post-war Japan begins to reinterpret authority, laying the groundwork for constitutional reform and democratization. Civilians, once conditioned to see loyalty as absolute, begin to understand that obedience coexists with moral judgment and survival. Emotionally, the broadcast imprints deeply on the collective memory. Survivors recall hearing the voice in hushed tones, over crackling radios, in moments of shock, disbelief, and reluctant acceptance. Scholars describe this as a pivotal moment in the Japanese psyche, the recognition that divine myth yields to human vulnerability, and that even emperors must confront consequences beyond their control. Families who lived through August 15th recount a mixture of relief, sorrow, and a dawning sense of responsibility for the nation's reconstruction. The emperor's decision also carries global significance. It demonstrates the interplay of symbolism and strategy in warfare, the power of communication to avert further bloodshed, and the human dimension behind military capitulation. Modern historians highlight how this unprecedented act of speaking directly to a nation underscores the complex morality of leadership, illustrating that courage in war is not only found on the battlefield, but also in the measured, deliberate use of authority to preserve life. Ultimately, August 15th becomes more than a surrender. It is a turning point in history. Japan emerges from the war humbled, yet capable of renewal. The emperor's voice, once silent and divine, becomes a bridge between destruction and reconstruction, myth and humanity, obedience and reflection. As the echoes of August 15th fade, the significance of that singular voice endures. For the people of Japan, it was more than a broadcast. It was a confrontation with reality, a bridge between centuries of imperial myth and the stark human vulnerability of their sovereign. The emperor's words forced a nation to reconcile loyalty with survival, tradition with necessity, and reverence with comprehension. Historians look back and see a moment where the immense machinery of war collided with the quiet weight of human decision. Millions had suffered, cities lay in ruins, and the nation's future hung by a fragile thread. But in the soft, deliberate tones of Hirohito, hope for continuity and survival emerged. His choice to speak directly, breaking centuries of silence, demonstrates the profound impact a single act of leadership can have on an entire people. The human element, trepidation, sorrow, moral courage is what transforms historical events into enduring lessons. Leaders confront impossible choices, and even in defeat, their actions shape not just military outcomes but the hearts and minds of those they lead. The August 15th broadcast illustrates that history is not only written in battles and treaties, but in the quiet, resonant moments when authority becomes human, when myth becomes mortal, and when a nation finally hears the voice it has long revered. In remembering this day, we are reminded of the fragile power of words, the weight of responsibility, and the profound connection between leader and people. August 15, 1945, stands as a testament to the human dimension of leadership, a voice breaking silence, a nation confronting truth, and a world witnessing the quiet, decisive turning of history.